Your AI these days is incredibly smart, but it's got the memory of a goldfish. Look, we've all had this experience. You're working with AI, Cursor, Claude Code, even ChatGPT, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. You're working with it and you've told it some instructions, and as you move along, you start to sense that it's no longer on track. It's not necessarily following your instructions, or maybe it's forgotten what you've told it to do, but it confidently tells you, no, 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 I know exactly what we're doing. We're still on track. Here we go. Let's keep working. But everything inside of you, you can't put your finger on it, tells you it is no longer understanding your instructions, or it's at least veering its own direction. So this is actually not a bug. It's a feature that hasn't yet landed. And here's the thing. This isn't a limitation of AI intelligence. These systems are genuinely brilliant. They can reason, they can code, they can solve problems that we have no chance of solving ourselves. The limitation isn't the model, it's the harness. This is a feature that hasn't yet been developed. So why does this matter? We all experience this every single day, but we can't quite put a name to it. It's the moment you get frustrated with AI. It's when you start believing these systems have severe limitations. But it's not actually a model limitation. It's a gap between how we interact with these systems. And because these interactions feel so human, we're susceptible to them in ways we can't possibly identify. Now, I think this gets solved this year. And when it does, I think it's going to unlock doors that we can't even actually understand yet. But until then, understanding how this missing feature affects your work can dramatically improve your use with AI across the board. Once you see what this is, you'll recognize it everywhere, and you'll begin to build muscles to work around it. Okay, so let's take a look at what's missing. I use Claude Code and other coding agents all of the time, and I see this every single day. And I've talked to a lot of other developers, and they're experiencing the exact same shortcomings, but none of us have the language to describe it. And once we do, I think that will enable us a little bit to get around the shortcomings while they're building the feature. So this video is actually to show you the problem so that you understand it, show you a few of the mitigating steps that I've taken to address it. By the way, they're not fantastic, but they do help. And that way you can kind of come up with your own mitigations to understand where these shortcomings exist in your workflow. All right, let's dive in and take a look. All right, I'm going to break this down into 3 different layers. They all look different, but they're actually all the exact same underlying problem. All right, layer 1 happens in minutes. So you're working with a coding agent, let's say in this example, you're building a UI and you've told it, make sure not to put any of the colors in the markup. I want to put that in some kind of style constants that are centralized that you always reference. System gets it, starts building. We've all seen this, working along, works for a while, creates a bunch of files, does a bunch of functions, starts creating tests. You work back and forth with it to fix some things, and all of a sudden you take a look at something and you realize, wait, there's color in this markup. I did, in this conversation, tell it not to put color in the markup. Why is color suddenly in the markup? So has it forgotten your information? Is it disregarding it because it's a better idea? Maybe you should leave it alone. Well, in reality, it's not that it forgot it. That text is still in there, but it's just text. It's text in a sea of other text, right? All of the tool calls, all of the files that it's reading through, all of the steps that it's taken, all of the conversation that you've had with it since. So it's got to find that needle every single time it puts a color into markup. And remember how important it is. Now, this is one of these examples that I feel like at those moments, this is something I told you. I know you read through a whole bunch of other things and your context is filling up with your own concerns. But wait a second, I'm a very important artifact inside of this process, this workflow that we're working on. I'm the human in the loop here. I really need you to pay attention to the things that I'm saying with a bit more weight than the things that you're just discovering as you move along. But it doesn't. Okay, layer 2 commonly happens in hours. So you're solving problem A. You're working along with the agent, and as you're working along, you both notice another problem, something else that doesn't seem quite right. You're still working on A, but you notice problem B, or another issue. You work back and forth with the model just a little bit to identify it, to understand it, and then you realize, okay, this is probably not the best pattern, and correctly what you do is you solve A. You get A solved, you get it committed, and you clear your context to start working on B. All right, you've done everything right at this point. But the problem is the context for B is back in that previous conversation. And you want to be able to say, hey, Can you take a look at that conversation about that API thing we were just doing and pull that in so that we can continue that conversation? But there's literally no way to do this. Every time you start a new context, it's a blank slate. And this is a real problem because this is literally, we have no example of working with other humans in this way. And these relationships, these conversations are starting to become very human feeling. And that is discordious to us. Those are those moments that we kind of feel like, oh, I'm just talking to a thing suddenly. So we need that affordance. That's not there yet. And layer 3 happens over weeks or months, or potentially eventually even longer than that. So you're working on a problem, you've solved all of these multitude of problems, you walk away from the project, and you come back a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later. You pull the project up and you kind of want to know where you were, what you were working on, or at least you want the model to have that understanding. You have these Claude MD files or cursor rules or other ways that you can kind of set some memory in the system, but that's not exactly contextualized memory. And if you saved everything that was ever important that you came across in a project, especially over time, that file would get enormous. You'd run out of context before you got started and it would have to collapse it immediately. So there's a lot of problems here. What you want to be able to say is, hey, we need to pick up where we were, and I need you contextualized in the way that we were contextualized last time. I also need to be oriented back to where we were, so can you tell me where we were? And all of these scenarios don't exist. That kind of interrelationship with a project or an agent that kind of lives within the project, we feel like that's what we're starting to build, but that is by no means what's actually happening when you walk back into these systems yet. We want it, we can all feel it, but it's not there. These are all the same problem at different scales. The system doesn't have actual memory. It has context that decays, and it has kind of instruction files that load every time, but what's missing is the middle. Contextual retrieval, the right information at the right time. Not something that loads every time or something that's forgotten entirely, but something that's there when you need it, when it finds it relevant. Here's the thing that makes this so frustrating. These systems today are genuinely capable of human-like interaction. They understand nuance. They respond intelligently. They reason about things. They remember what you said 5 interactions ago and can reference it directly. They feel like collaborators. So we fall into treating them that way. We explain ourselves, we give context, we're polite to them. In fact, we give them levels of respect that we don't even give to most animals. That's not only expected, it's actually desired. These human-like interactions create human-like emotional responses. And that actually gives us a lot more flow capability to be creative in our interactions with these models. It literally makes the whole system work the way it does. The problem is the harnesses are not equipped for this. It's not the models. So they can do it for a while. We can do it for a series of conversations or one context, or maybe over a course of work with the right memory files in place. But over time, no matter what, all of this degrades because the actual functionality is not built in there yet. And okay, so here's what creates the actual friction. You've experienced this. As you're going through this and you kind of get frustrated with the model and say, didn't I tell you not to put the colors in the markup? It apologizes. It says, oh yeah, that's right. Looking back now, you did tell me that. I need to pay attention to that. I won't do that again. And it makes promises. This is exactly the right interaction pattern. This is what we want these models to do. We want them to understand their faults, describe to us how it saw that fault and how it might fix it, and then move forward. This is a very human-like interaction, but the problem is these systems are not equipped to be able to remember this, so they are going to fail going forward. So the moment that it says, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that again, we all know this moment, 5 minutes later, it's doing it again, and you get frustrated. All of a sudden, your tension builds, and you get very frustrated wondering why it keeps wandering off the rails even though you keep telling it the same instruction. It's not the model. These systems are not equipped to do this yet. This isn't because AI is bad. It's because memory isn't just remembering things. Memory has dimensions. We have new memories versus old memories, important memories versus trivial memories, long-term memories versus short-term memories. And these systems absolutely do not understand the nuances between those things, but our interactions with it make us believe that they do. There's no way to say, this is important and never forget it, to mark something as critical. But memory needs attention. an understanding of the different weights or the different scales. And this doesn't exist yet. Okay, so let's talk about what's already out there. What can you use and when are they useful? All right, so we've already talked about the agent files, the Claude MD file, the agent MD file, something like that. That's project level kind of functionality that works within these coding environments. It doesn't necessarily work in all environments, ChatGPT and other things like that. But the problem with these is these are essentially not memory, they're system instructions. And so they're loaded in, preloaded into a conversation, so that conversation is oriented towards something, and as your context grows, decay starts to occur. That's the thing we've been talking about. So they're fundamentally not actually active memory. It's not the way we think memory works. Back in September, Anthropic released something they call Claude memory, which is basically this kind of agent file for a project or project folder or something like that in their environment. It's kind of the same problem, right? It front loads everything. Everything is loaded. It all has the same weight, and it decays over time. OpenAI went another route. With ChatGPT, they have essentially two tiers of memory, an explicit and an implicit. The explicit is when you tell it to save something. I want you to remember this about me, and it will put that into a file. That's basically the agent's file, once again, that it's preloading context in. And the other one is an implicit that does look across other conversations that you've had, which is an interesting sounding concept. And that sounds great, right? Well, the problem is something researchers call context collapse. When the AI has reference to everything, all of your personal chats and work chats and just conversations and things you've looked up, then everything looks the same and it's homogenized, and it doesn't necessarily bring impact when it's needed, and it's no longer useful. So that's the opposite problem. Instead of no memory, you get completely undifferentiated memory. And both of these extremes just basically don't work and actually are not the way memory works. Again, it's not the way we use memory and the way that we can random access memory in the midst of an ongoing conversation. So what can you do right now, today, to make a difference and kind of get around some of these problems? If you now understand when you're talking to ChatGPT, context depth, information distribution, kind of this decay that's happening with memory, all of that kind of stuff is important. And even ChatGPT, where it might be giving you information from other chats that you didn't intend, those are things to just become aware of. That will help you interact with ChatGPT. So that's number one, it's worth understanding. Also, when you're working in a coding agent, understanding when information is going into the system, so what level of importance it shows inside of the context is a very important first step. But let me share with you a few other things that I actually do or have tried just as an exploration. There is absolutely no secret here. There's no silver bullet, I'm sorry to tell you. The silver bullet is this is going to be solved sometime for us this year. All right, as I said, there's no silver bullet here, but I'm going to share a few tips that actually do move the needle a little bit in this space. Number one, your agents file, your Claude MD or agents MD file. That is real memory. It's the best we've got right now. I know I said that it's not actual memory, but it's really what we've got. So the thing you want to do is you want to put things in there that actually matter, that you need the system to know now during your recent builds all of the time. Very often, if you do something like /init, all of these systems come with this init mechanism that will write one of these files for you. If you look through it, the things that are in there will be discovered if you take them out. So in other words, they put all the scripts in there that say, here's how I build, and here's how I test, and here's... You don't need that in there, because if you tell the agent later, hey, can you build this system? It will say, it'll scratch its head and say, okay, let me look around and figure out how to build the system. It will get there. It knows how to go find that information. That doesn't need to be something that you're loading your context with again and again and again, unless you're building all the time. Then it's very useful. So you should start thinking of that Claude MD file or agents file as yours. Anything you say to the system 2 or 3 times in a row, put it in that agents file. Let's talk about the kind of cooperative that works with the agents file, which is your context, because your agents file is basically loaded into the context. And as we've heard, it pollutes over time. So clear your context. You want to get to a place to where you feel very comfortable clearing your context on the regular. Now, that will mean that you're going to lose things that you've been having in this conversation and wonder about that A-B problem. I'm working on problem A. We talked about problem B. If I clear my context, I have to go reconstruct everything that we were talking about with problem B. So here's another thing that I do in those places. I don't just clear context, move on, and recontextualize. Because I can't tell the system yet to go look at previous history. Hey, by the way, people that are writing Codex, Claude Code, Gemini CLI, all these tools, can I ask for one thing? Here's what I would like. I would like to be able to say, can you look at our last conversation and pick out a summary of X? I need that so that I can clearly and quickly, easily clear my context and then just move on. This would save me from this next piece of advice, which is before I clear my context, I will often tell the agent, we were just talking about this problem. I am going to move this to another agent. I need you to write a file that encapsulates all of everything we were talking about that's important about that thing. And I have a docs folder that just starts to get filled up with all of these contextualizations. I'll delete them after I don't need them anymore. It's a lot of manual management, but it helps quite a bit. And then when I move on to problem B with a clear context, I say, load yourself up with this information, and then let's go. So that's one way to deal with it, is remember that you're having to solve this problem for it. You're basically doing what the harness needs to do for it while it's not doing it. It's not the AI's fault. You need to help it in this regard. All right, and this brings me to something I've shared in the channel before. I call it my open agent system. I'm not advocating for that. I'm more pointing at how I deal with memory there. Basically, what I do is I create a series of instruction files. I think of them as kind of agent files or skill files. You might consider them if you're a Claude Code user. They're just markdown files that say, hey, if we're doing this, here's how you do it. Here's the instructions. And I don't load those into context, meaning I don't put that information into something like the agents.md or claudemd file. I let it just sit as an instruction file. The easy thing to do at that case would be anytime that you want to do that action, you could say, hey, go read this file and do that. That's a reasonable way to do it. You can put it in a prompt command, those kinds of things as well. What I do is I go into my Claude file, my agent file, and say, anytime we're talking about X and you're not sure what to do, go read that instruction file. And that's that progressive enhancement, that it'll go over and start reading extraneous information files. That's a way to kind of manage this memory yourself. You can also tell the agent to manage these memory files. Hey, please add this to our build instructions. So this is an imperfect solution. I really want to say that out loud, but these are the ways that I kind of mitigate this problem. Number one, get your agents file clean and understand what's going into your context, clear your context a lot, and let's ask these people to kind of write a, can you look at the last conversation? All right, so here's what I want you to take away from this. It's not that you're anthropomorphizing AI. I mean, you are, we all are, and that's actually a good thing. That's actually what's kind of creating part of the value from all of this. Us being able to interact with these things and have kind of a feeling that they know how to interact in a cooperative way and a kind of a coworker kind of relationship, that's a super unlock. So don't feel like that's your problem. You should stop treating this as a human. You should treat it as a machine. That's fine. But the reality is it's going to trick you. You're not really in charge of that. The problem is the way you're interacting with this thing, it doesn't have all of the skills a human has, not for longer term kind of timescale problems. Anything that has a time horizon to it, these things fall down because they don't have memory, and the memory they do have that they call memory is not real memory because they can't contextualize the importance of something. And so these skills, these tools actually need to be added. I think this year they're going to be added, and when they are, I think we don't even understand what the other side of that looks like. We will have relationships with these things in a good way and maybe kind of an unsafe way sometimes as well. But what's more important is they will become partners in the solutions that we're already trying to engage them in. And finally, the next time you get frustrated at AI because it keeps doing the same thing over and over, and you speak louder and louder into your microphone and your speech to text just puts it out as a normal sentence. Thank goodness they don't know that I'm yelling at them when this happens. Understand it's not you, it's not it. It's actually a tool set that you wish existed. That's just you wishing. I understand you're frustrated. I'm frustrated. Hopefully this helps a little bit with that. In any case, thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.